ST, Towson Bowl. The Terrapins in non-legal, litigious football terms. There was a real basketball game on Wednesday night. It wasn't the start of the season. They said they were 6-0 before they got started. We were at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air. Big thanks to Joe and the crew up there for treating us right. Luke was watching the game, and we're getting ready for football this weekend. But here comes the Big Ten season all of a sudden with Penn State and Purdue around the corner. And Luke, I'll say this, and I think everybody would say this. Not many people have watched the Terps at length this year through their first 6 games. I watched a little part of the first one 3 weeks ago and, catch a little internet this and a little highlight that. But to sit and watch them on Wednesday night take on, obviously, a very deep, big, great shooting team and sort of go toe-to-toe, there are no moral victories. But if it's about getting our attention, I think the Terps are going to be okay this year, Luke.
I think that's a fair way to put it. I mean, we've seen Mark Turgeon teams play really good teams tough, and you get excited, and then we see how it's kind of gone.
Well, when it got to 4 points with 2 minutes left, I was feeling like, I said to my wife, Maryland does this all the time. They're going to lose by 8.
Right. So I want to be really careful with getting too excited about a, quote, moral victory, but they are very young. They did have some freshmen who really stepped up in the second half, and Virginia is a really, really good team. And on top of that, they're very, very difficult to play against because they have such a different style. It's almost like what we're talking about with the Ravens right now, with their offense playing a style that's so much different than everyone else and having such a unique talent in Lamar Jackson. Well, Virginia, they play slow. They defend so well. Their offense is so efficient. And it's really tough to score points against them. And Maryland scored 71 against them. Now, you would have liked to see them defend better. I think they defended better in the second half. And I think overall, for being a young team, Maryland's defended pretty well so far this season, albeit against a bunch of non-conference opponents prior, and non-conference Virginia, but an old ACC foe and a legitimate competitor. But there's definitely some things to like about this team so far. And, they're going to have to get better. And that's been one of my critiques of Mark Turgeon is his Maryland teams not feeling like they've really gotten better as the season's gone on, despite bringing in some talented kids. And, we think about kind of the hired guns they had a few years back, and, you think of guys like Melo Trimble who didn't necessarily get better, despite being really good as a freshman. So,
well, if this is the beginning and they do get better, we're in pretty good shape. I mean, I remember, to your point, the first time we saw Diamond Stone and Suleiman and these different guys early in these North Carolina games or, whatever ACC game they're playing at the beginning of the year, whatever tournament they're on, the Gary Williams teams were notoriously either much better or much worse by the time, Groundhog Day rolls around, right?
Yeah. I mean, you usually expected Gary Williams teams to be better as the season would go on, even if they weren't all that super talented. And with Mark Turgeon, we just haven't seen enough of that. So I'll be skeptical in that regard. But, even though Jalen Smith didn't have a great game on Wednesday night, he's certainly been impressive early in the season. You can see it with him. I haven't watched every single minute of Terrapin basketball so far this season, but he has certainly flashed and played well. Ayala and Wiggins hit some big shots in the second half, certainly provided them some outside shooting that was really lacking in the first half. And you have Bruno Fernando and Anthony Cowan as, it's crazy to say it because they're not seniors, but they've been there.
They're the seniors of this group,
bit.
Right? They're the guys we're familiar with and we know, and Morcell as well. But Sticks is going to be the guy, that I think by the time February comes around and we start getting on these flights to Iowa and Nebraska and Wisconsin, he's going to have to be the guy that's, along with Fernando, you're going to have to deal with him. And I don't know that Virginia had to do that so much on Wednesday night.
Right. So, I think the elements are there for this to be a good team. Certainly they were down big, 17 points fairly early in the second half.
And you pooped on them on Twitter. I saw that.
Well, it's just, Hey, what, a 9-1 run right out
dude,
of the...
you asked somebody to wake them up. They woke up. I mean, they got back in the game.
They did, right? So someone down in College Park listened to me.
My wife's elbowing me over wings like, hey, they're getting back in this. And I'm like, I'm a Maryland guy. I've watched this since Len Elmore, all right? So.
Right. But, I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic, but I've been that way with a lot of Mark Turgeon teams and ended up feeling underwhelmed at the end of the season. So we'll see. But, again, a 5-point loss to Virginia, nothing to be ashamed about. Virginia's really, really good. They're really different. And, again, considering how good defensively they are, the fact that Maryland was able to score 41 points in the second half and also get to the foul line. Now, they need to do a little bit better job making their free throws, but Virginia's a team that doesn't foul. So the fact that they were able to draw some fouls, even though they kind of went with some of their small lineups and they had either Bruno or Jalen Smith on the floor, that was encouraging to see. So I think, considering how young they are, you have to be, I don't want to say pleased because, hey, you don't want your standard to be so low that you're happy with the loss. But I still think there was some encouraging points to take away from Wednesday night's loss.
Luke Jones is here. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. Again, big thanks to everybody this week who came out to Patrick's Pub to visit with Matt Skur and get swabbed for the Bone Marrow Registry in Essex on Tuesday. We were at Buffalo Wild Wings on Wednesday night doing it with my pal Eric Sauer was there. From There Goes My Hero, and we watched the Terps battle to the end here. And the Big Ten schedule coming up right now, this is unique, and I know anybody that sort of follows the narrative knows this is the way it's going now, where they've added these extra games. Penn State on Saturday night, but the trip to Purdue, and I know you and I had such a great time out there a couple years ago, comes next Thursday night. This is a nice little week of a test for them, and I thought Virginia was a nice test for them, that they're not going to have a lot of these kind of games. There are more cream puffs on all the schedules earlier in the year than there are these sort of big Kentucky-Duke matchups. That. And by the way, the Jimmy V thing, I don't know if you had the sound up or not, but it's still very difficult to get through, right? 30 years later, whatever it is, right?
I didn't get to watch it on Wednesday night, but that's something that I've watched on a number of occasions, and it's both heartbreaking but also uplifting at the same time when you think about the inspiration there and everything the Jimmy V Foundation has done, and what, as much as ESPN gets a lot of criticism, and rightfully so, the amount of money that they've been able to raise for cancer research, it's something that I do look forward to seeing most years, even if I don't catch it every year. But to your point, as far as with getting back to the Terps, you look at this next week. I mean, they had a test against Virginia that they didn't pass in terms of winning, but I think you saw good things. You saw them compete. They dealt with some resiliency, so that was good to see. Now Penn State comes in. They play at Purdue. This is going to be a good week for them as far as seeing where they are. I mean, I
thought they were playing well on. It feels to me like these are not just Penn State, but I mean the Purdue thing, to go out there and win in the Big Ten, that would. That'd be putting your flag down if they can do that. And they looked capable on, if they lost by 20 points on Wednesday night, we'd be like, well, that's not where we are. And I think every Terps fan was a little bit energized by that Wednesday. I think in a loss, and I know there's no moral victories, but if it's about waking you up after Thanksgiving and saying, is this going to be a year where I'm going to pay attention 2 or 3 nights a week? This is the year I think people are going to pay attention 2 or 3 nights a week.
You would certainly hope so. And going on the road is a different animal. We understand that. And you and I have been to Purdue and know that that can be an intimidating atmosphere when the Boilermakers are a good basketball team and they're in the top 25. I think there's always that feeling out period early in the season to really know who exactly is good. I mean, I think everyone expects Michigan to be great. And after that, you kind of go through the list and say, okay, well, who lost? Which teams lost big contributors? Who has exciting freshmen coming in? So there's that feeling out period. But if you can go to Purdue and if you can get a win, and I think what Maryland showed on Wednesday night should suggest that that's not impossible, then I think you really start to get excited. But I'll remind everyone it's a young team, and it'll be a young team playing on the road for the first time. It's first big road game, and I know they played at Navy a couple weeks ago, but a big-time road venue to have to play. Let's just remind everyone that might not go as well as you'd hope.
Well, then they get off a plane in the morning and they're going to play in Baltimore, on Saturday too. So, I mean, next weekend there's a big thing here, and then they play Loyola of Maryland, believe it or not, at home after that. So, next week and a half, I think people are going to, aside from the Ravens playing on Sunday and what's going to happen in Atlanta and playing Pat Mahomes next week, I think the Terps become much more full focus for our fan base and for the people who listen to NST and the people that are waiting on the Orioles to hire a manager. This is a nice little diversion. At least it is for me, because I'm not watching the Caps or the Wizards. Nobody's watching the Wizards this year. But I think, this is a little part of the winter that's going to be a nice thing, unlike the Orioles for the next 5 summers that, as we sit here every single day and talk about their irrelevancy, it feels nice that Maryland feels relevant, and it feels even nicer that there are 5 or 6 teams in the Big Ten that all look very, very capable. There are going to be a lot of big games, I think, by the time we get to February, and you start seeing Purdue, Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State all back-to-back-to-back. They're all ranked right now. Maryland's not.
Yeah, well, Maryland.
24.
Remember, Maryland's 24 in the AP
right.
poll, but it really, we'll see. I don't want to get too excited. They lost the game. I'll remind everyone of that. But I'm really hoping that the youth on this team can grow up quickly, and they grew up in the second half against Virginia, and that was good to see. But much as we're talking about Lamar Jackson's development right now, the development of young players, it's not just the straight ascending line. It's kind of all over the place. So let's see how they respond. Certainly, they need to beat Penn State. I mean, that's a game you should always win when you're on your home floor, and then see how they do against Purdue. They'll play Loyola Chicago, which is interesting, of course, with them coming off of just an incredible story in the tournament last year. And then they'll play Loyola, and then they'll get a 11-day break for finals. So the Terps become they kind of come on the radar here just long enough until they go away again for finals, and then obviously the Big Ten schedule will pick up right around the first of the year. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I really like Jalen Smith. I like Ayala. I like Wiggins. So they have some young players. I'm really intrigued to see Bruno Fernando in his second year in Big Ten play and see how he responds. And I know Mark Turgeon has even talked about Anthony Cowan. And despite the fact that he's been around a couple years, thinks that he's really grown as a point guard. So they're going to need that leadership on the floor. I mean, they are very young. You're hoping some other young guys come on as the year goes on, but you know that there are going to be growing pains with that. So I hope this is a tournament team. I think it should be a tournament team.
By the way, while you're talking tournament, I want to give you my optimism. I just Googled the Big Ten tournament. It is in Chicago this year, because remember the New York thing and the Washington thing. It's been very East Coasty here the last couple of years. Chicago begins on March 13th, and I'm wondering exactly what game Maryland's going to slot in here. I've got them skipping out on Wednesday and Thursday and beginning as one of the top 4 seeds on Friday the 15th. How about that?
Man, you are optimistic. That wouldn't stun me, but
they'll be the 4 seed. They're going to play the 3 p.m. game on Friday the 15th. There, yeah, I figured it all out. But wake me up on March 15th. Come back.
Right. But
let me know who's
I've
president
also seen
that day,
Mark
too.
Turgeon teams that looked promising early in the season and just it never materializes. So I'm skeptical, more so of him than these kids. I mean, these are some really talented recruits. I mean, this was a good recruiting class.
Well, that's always the case, right? That's been the story here in recent years.
For the most part,
we've never really rolled the ball out this time of the year, and I bring the Orioles up where, you show up at spring training and you don't have the players. I mean, that rarely happened during Gary's administration. It happened more at the end when everybody was taking, $1 billion handshakes to come and play for 4 months. But, after Steve Francis, Gary sort of cut that out, and there were a lot of years where Gary would look at Duke's roster and North Carolina's roster and occasionally Wake or Virginia or Clemson or, Virginia Tech or Georgia Tech, where they would have better basketball players. I would say that about Michigan or Michigan State most years in this conference. Or there's a team out there, Wisconsin a couple of years ago, that gets better players. But it's never for lack of players in the Big Ten. I mean, unlike in football, right? In football, you look at the rosters and Maryland's in over their head. Basketball never feels that way.
No, and it shouldn't be that way. I mean, you're talking about a program that, despite its shortcomings and lack of overall success in the last decade plus, this is a team that won the national championship and went to a couple Final Fours. So
I even wore the hat on Wednesday night.
Right. I saw that, but they're replacing some Kevin Herter leaving and going pro. I mean, that was certainly something that you wouldn't have necessarily expected a year ago at this time, but that's a loss, and that's someone that they were probably hoping would be their best player this year, and maybe put them in the conversation to make the Sweet 16, maybe the Elite Eight if things go extremely well. So you have to replace that. So they have talent. There's no doubt about that. Mark Turgeon has done a good job of bringing talented players to College Park, but again, what are you doing with those players? And that's where I'm going to remain a little more skeptical of him, not these kids. But I liked what I saw overall on Wednesday night. Virginia's a really, really tough team. They're so unique.
Unless you're UMBC, of course, right?
Yeah, well, of course.
Was Zach trolling them?
That's the one thing the Retrievers can kind of bark about. Hey,
was he trolling them on? I don't know. I didn't follow UMBC. I don't follow UMBC anymore.
I didn't get a chance to, but
they don't follow me, so I don't follow them. So let me see here. Hold on here. Come on, there had to have been something decent. Unless Zach's not running it anymore, because Zach had to have something snarky about the Terps last night, right? Come on.
You would think so. I did not see it come across my timeline. And
I am very, very disappointed. If anybody sees Zach Seidel, if he didn't get one good burn in on Maryland, then something's wrong over in Catonsville. How about that?
Yeah. But we'll see what happens here. I mean, the next 10 days will be a nice test for the Terps, see where they are. It's not going to determine anything one way or the other, but interested to see how they play going out to Purdue, and then they'll get the little bit of a respite for finals, and then before you know it, the Big Ten schedule really cranks up. Not this this 2-game soft opening that we've seen now the last couple of years, but I think this team has a chance to be in the mix and be certainly should be an NCAA tournament team. But again, I've said that about a couple other Terps teams over the last 5 years that didn't necessarily live up to those expectations.
You can see them at the Royal Farms Arena next Saturday, taking on Loyola, the one from Chicago with the cute nun, and we also have them playing Loyola of Maryland after that down at College Park. Luke Jones is here, Baltimore Luke out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by all of our great sponsors. Let me go through some of them so that you know who to reach to say, hey, thanks for supporting WNST and Luke and Nestor and everything we're doing around here to bring you the best coverage, whether it's the text service, whether it's the morning newspaper, whether it's the audio vault, our website, all of our social media, all brought to you by our friends at Curio, our newest sponsor, the holistic world of wellness in the spa and the cannabis education. The next class is the 19th of December out on York Road, just south of Timonium. Find them out online at Curio and Curio Wellness, or just stop by and say hello. Strategic Factory. I'm wearing my Strategic Fest shirt here today. They're out in Owings Mills. They do marketing, printing, promotional goods, like the hat I'm wearing, of all kinds. If you need signage, printed, branded apparel, Strategic Factory is the answer for you. We're going to have Keith on next week as well. Lifebridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. I caught up with Dr. Craig Bennett. I'm having a little elbow issue here. I might wind up in the clinic out there at Foundry Row in Owings Mills, and then you'll hear about the weekend warriors and the yoga mat warriors like myself. World-class care right where you are, and Cal Ripken looks great on those billboards. My appreciation to Lifebridge Health Sports Medicine Institute for sponsoring us and being one of our newest sponsors, as well as the Modell Lyric. Beach Boys singing Christmas songs this week down at the Modell Lyric. Mike Love bringing the lads in, and I'm sure they'll be singing all the hits. My favorite, God Only Knows, of course, and Sloop John B. Come on, Little Deuce Coupe. Beach Boys at the Modell Lyric. There's always magic at the Modell Lyric. Joe Bonamassa coming up in March. John Mellencamp in February. I just missed Straight No Chaser the other night so I could go see Bonham. Don't tell John, he'll be mad at me, but Zeppelin over Straight No Chaser. I'm a big Straight No Chaser guy, but I had to do the Zeppelin thing. And I'm waiting for that reschedule for Kansas on March 1st as well. There's always magic at the Modell Lyric. Sporticulture. Flowers around me. I got to get some flowers in the studio for the holidays. I want to hit Cord up about that. You can hit Cord up by going to sporticulture.com, one click away. Officially licensed NFL flowers as well as college pots. So if, I got Alabama and Georgia this week for the SEC Championship down in Atlanta. You can send a Georgia Bulldogs flower. You can send an Alabama flower, one click away. Sporticulture, they're beautiful. Makes a perfect holiday gift. Luke is here, and speaking of the Ravens in Atlanta, and by the way, it took me getting Marty Conway on the phone on Wednesday morning, Luke. I realized, like, all the hotel rooms in Atlanta were really expensive. I was looking to move my hotel, and I'm like, the hell is going on in Atlanta this weekend besides, a Raven-Falcon game when they're 4-7? And I'm like, oh, yeah, Elton John's playing Friday and Saturday night, but Elton John's not bringing people into hotel rooms. And then Marty Conway, whose daughter, Kelsey, works for the Falcons, as you know, and worked for the Ravens for a period of time as well. He said, yeah, the whole city's a buzz, man. They got the SEC championship game there. I'm like, forgot all about that. And my wife's like, well, why don't you go to the game? And I Googled, it's like $325 to get in to see Alabama play Georgia in the new dome down there. So a wild weekend of football ahead for me in the SEC in Atlanta, but certainly it's sort of a season-defining game, I think, for the Ravens. This would be a difference-making game if you really believe they're going to lose in Kansas City and they stand a strong chance of losing out in Carson. This has to be the one they win, and the intrigue sort of ramps up all week long with the quarterback situation, right?
Yeah, I don't know how much intrigue there really is until if we see Joe Flacco practice, maybe there's a chance he plays, but it's going to be Lamar Jackson. Joe didn't practice on Wednesday, and whether he can log a little bit of practice time at the end of the week, I'm not so sure that's going to happen, but even if it does, you're talking about someone who hasn't played in close to a month. So it looks like it's going to be the Lamar Jackson show again, and it's going to be interesting seeing him on the road for the first time, making a start. Be interesting seeing him on the turf. I want to say the Cincinnati game is the only time that the Ravens have played on turf this year, and when you're talking about his speed and putting him on a faster track, that's always intriguing. But to your point, this is the road game they need to have. You would love for them to figure out a way to beat Kansas City or the Chargers, but this is the one, and looking at it on a very simplistic level, this is a Falcons team that's 4-7, and they've struggled, and they've really fallen out of the playoff race in the NFC, and even their offense, which you look on paper and say,
wow,
they should be explosive, and their overall numbers are still good, but look at what they've done the last 3 or 4 weeks. They've struggled to score points even. So do I think that's going to continue the rest of the year? Probably not, but if you're the Ravens, you want to do everything you can to avoid them breaking out of that part of their slump on Sunday, because if you can't get this one, I don't know what gives you any thought, any confidence whatsoever that they have a prayer to go to Kansas City or a great chance to go out to L.A. and try to beat the Chargers. So we've said if they want to go 9-7, and that's the bare minimum, and that's assuming that your tiebreakers line up okay, and that Indianapolis doesn't go on an absolute tear or continue the absolute tear that they've been on, let me say. But you need to get this one. And if you don't get this one, then 8-8 feels really likely at this point. So, and that's assuming you still take care of all your home games. So they need to figure it out. It's not going to be easy. It's a lot of pressure to put on Lamar Jackson, who is making his first road start, and we know what most quarterbacks do on the road compared to it at home. They struggle more. Look at Joe Flacco. He's a perfect example. Look at his career road numbers compared to his career home numbers, at least in the regular season. Now, maybe Flacco on the road in the playoffs put up some big numbers, but it's tough to do, and it's a lot of pressure to put on Jackson, and it's just going to be imperative that they can run the ball, maybe not as effectively as they did the last 2 weeks, but somewhere close to that, because I don't think the formula is going to be to put the ball in Lamar Jackson's, put it on his throwing shoulder 35, 40 times. I think that's a recipe to be defeated at this point. But can you run as successfully? Can you maximize your red zone opportunities? There's been a lot of excitement, and I understand that. And there's plenty of intrigue, and it's been good to see them run the football. But I'll also remind everyone, for all the talk about what they're doing now and how their offense was struggling before, and Flacco wasn't playing well before he got hurt, and look, there's validity to those statements, but they've scored 4 offensive touchdowns the last 2 weeks. 2 offensive touchdowns. I'm not talking about Cyrus Jones or Terrell Suggs. 2 offensive touchdowns per game. That's really mediocre. That's really pedestrian. They've been 4 for 8 inside the red zone the last 2 weeks. If you're going to play ball control against really good offensive football teams to try to keep the ball out of Matt Ryan's hands or Patrick Mahomes' hands or Phillip Rivers' hands, you need to make sure you're scoring touchdowns inside the red zone, because if you're trying to do that and you're settling for field goals, that means you're not going to get as many possessions overall, most likely, and that's a good recipe to be beat 24-17. I mean, it's just, we talked about it for years when the Ravens would play New England 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. You have to score touchdowns inside the red zone, and they've been 4 for 8, which is not great. So there's definitely some challenges there. They need their defense to travel. We've talked about the defense for since the bye week. It's been okay. It's been solid. I don't think it's been great considering they played 2 bad teams at home the last 2 weeks, but they're going to need that defense to hit another level, and you hope what Matt Judon provided at the end of the game really, that leads to the pass rush getting going again. That leads to getting some more takeaways. They're still looking for their first pick since the Cleveland game, which is just insane when you think about it, but here we go. This is a team that needs a road victory. This is an opponent that has really struggled and is by most accounts out of the playoff race in the NFC. So you need to go take care of business, but I don't think it's going to be easy.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke. We're trying to get the infirmary together for Atlanta. If you're on the WNST text service, all brought to you by Coons Ford up Security Boulevard. You'll get it first. And, of course, Dennis is here every Thursday from 3 until 5. Luke has that out as well as early on Sunday morning. And, Luke, at some point we'll get an Oriole manager, right? I mean, I don't – that's not going to happen soon, right? I mean, and everything here is happening in the shadows. Talk about a team with no marketing. I mean, every day they should be doing something to keep people interested, and they just go away for long stretches of time. I mean, we're already 2 weeks down on the press conference now, right? Like, literally, and we haven't heard a word out of anybody. It's almost like they're the organization that hides. It's. I talk about it every day, and I bring it up because I say to you, hey, you want to talk about the Orioles today? You're like, well, there's nothing to talk about. Well, there's nothing to talk about tomorrow, and there's nothing to talk about this weekend. There's nothing to talk about next month, and there hasn't been anything to talk about in 2 months. At some point, they should want us talking about them. and I'll leave it at that and let you say whatever you want to say. But they did fire their scouting director this week. Let's throw that in here for the week.
Yeah, I mean, Gary Racich is not going to return. And
That's not a shock.
But that said, other than maybe the Atlanta Braves and who's really making headlines right now?
Nobody.
This is kind of the nature of what free agency has become because, and some people call it collusion. Some people say teams are just getting smarter because they're not throwing stupid money at 32-year-old free agents, and no disrespect intended to Adam Jones because he's someone who kind of fits into that category. But
he's about to feel the disrespect, whatever that is. Whatever the market is, because Adam Jones isn't a bad ball player. He's he's a declining ball player. But in this market, and he doesn't want to be a fourth outfielder, right? Like, you know what I mean? So
I think he'll get starting work somewhere. But I think any designs of getting a 4-year contract. I mean, I think he's going to probably settle for a 2-year deal. I'm guessing that's what it's going to be. My overall prediction for him, and I haven't really thought about it too carefully, but I'm guessing Adam Jones gets a 2-year, $20 million contract, which 5 years ago, even someone of his cachet, even someone acknowledging that he's 33 and he's not a center fielder anymore, 5 years ago he would have gotten a 4-year, $50 million contract. So it's definitely changing, and I know people are skeptical, but I also think there are lots of smart people, and I think Mike Elias is someone who fits into this category, who would say, why would you spend that kind of money on a 32 or 33-year-old, especially if you're a team that's still building? It's one thing if you have, let's say, the Yankees roster or the Red Sox roster or the Cubs, just throw out whatever, elite or close to elite roster you can find. It's one thing for them to sign someone like that that's, that you're just saying, well, that fills a specific need for us. But beyond that, if you're just trying to build and you're just trying to get better mode, why would you waste money on guys like that when there are going to be other bargains, and there's going to be younger players that are better values. So from that standpoint, I'm not surprised that you haven't seen the Orioles making big headlines over the last 11, 12 days. They do need to hire a manager. I've said to you on a number of occasions, and I'll say it even when they hire their manager, I'm not terribly excited about the manager. I just am not, because so much of what's really important for this organization right now is going on behind the scenes and is going to be going on the lower level. And they have the Rule 5 draft coming up at the winter meetings, and this is absolutely the year where you should take a Rule 5 pick and carry them on your roster all year, because you're going to be terrible no matter what 25 players you pick. So this is the year that you absolutely should have a Rule 5 pick, maybe a second one. But beyond that, it's going to be a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes, building infrastructure. And I know Mike Elias is trying his best to make some hay in the international market, and that's going to be something. Keep in mind, they have all this international bonus slot money that is good for them to use until June. Now, the problem is most of the talent in the international pipeline has long been signed, but considering he does have some contacts, he knows agents that represent international players, and he does have a little more networking capability than anyone with the Orioles had previously. Can he find some diamonds in the rough that aren't going to be anyone that anyone's heard of, but maybe will pay off in the next few years? So, I mean, it's a process, and again, it's a process that's not exciting. There aren't shortcuts to it, but you hope come 3, 4, 5 years from now, you start to see the fruits of that. So I know everyone's focused on the manager, and look, will they end up signing a veteran player or two to kind of fill out their roster? Yeah. I mean, it's going to be Kevin Millar types, or that kind of thing. I mean, I know.
So you think they will, and I'm not even sure they will.
Well,
having read Astro Ball and knowing where they were and knowing how it was run, and I would think the only mistakes that they look back on and think they made were paying guys for years where they were going to win 58 games, anything. And that was part of Jim Crane running the place when they had no money as well. And the Orioles are, listen, man, 2 weeks from now, December 14th, this ruling's coming down. Major League Baseball's going to, they've been trying for 12 years to come in and not steal the Orioles' money to get their fair share. And Peter has banked all of this money. I mean, John and Lou might be cutting a $400 million check to their partners before Christmas. So, money, as much as 15 years ago, money was everything around here, and it was all about money. Now the fans have no expectations of them pissing away $3.5 million on some washed-up Mark Trumbo to come in and hit 264 and bat in the middle of the order to sort of make it look legitimate. They've got Trey Mancini for that. You know what I mean? Like, literally, I would be shocked if there are any Jay Paytons running around here. I'll be shocked if there's any Cashners or, even what they're going to do with Cobb, right?
Well, I mean, I think trying to trade Alex Cobb's not going to be easy with 3 years left on his deal.
I understand that.
And I don't think you just give him away, because I think Alex Cobb's going to be much better. He was much better in the second half of last season. But to your point,
I think these guys love high A prospects, and especially if they're guys they like. If they can get
one
guy and have to pay this guy, and 3 years from now they get a Darren O'Day out of it, they'd be happy with that. I mean,
sure. And what I meant by signing a veteran or two, this kind of goes back to how free agency has evolved. I think if you see that, it's going to be in early February, someone that was projected to be a 3-year, $21 million kind of player, they end up getting for 1 year, $3 million. And the reason why is they think it's a player that will fill in some gaps for 3 or 4 months, and then guess what? You'll trade him at the deadline.
And the Oakland A's do that. That's Billy Bean's MO, right?
So that's what I'm talking. To your point, I don't see them giving anyone, any kind of veteran, a multi-year deal. I mean, even a 2 or 3 year deal. I mean, that would be very surprising. It's going to be the 1 year, a Mike Moustakas kind of situation that we saw this past year. I mean,
remember the Braves went and gave Markakis all that money when they stunk, and he took it and he wanted to go there, and but that was in the days when Markakis could get a 4-year deal like that. Adam Jones isn't getting that.
And if you remember, the Braves were criticized for that. Kind of like, what are you doing? I mean, this is and Markakis, it worked out the final year, but let's not pretend that he was great for the Braves over the last 4 years. He was, for about 3.5 of those years, he was a guy. He was a solid contributor, but he wasn't anything that was over the top special. So I mean, a lot of what they're going to do, they're going to look for. I think you're still going to see a lot of the minor league signings that Dan Duquette was kind of known for. You're going to see a lot of that because why not? I mean, they don't cost anything, and as Buck Showalter would say, over the last 3 or 4 years for the Orioles, they felt that they could out-opportunity other people, and that's one thing the Orioles can kind of do right now for minor league free agents and guys that have been elsewhere, that former highly touted picks who never panned out. Can the former Astros being with the Orioles now, can Elias and Meidel work their magic and find a few diamonds in the rough? I mean, they're going to have to get lucky on some things too. It's not just going to be the first overall pick and draft picks and spending big money on certain international free agents. You're going to have to find some real diamonds in the rough too. I mean, that's just the way this works, and it's the way it worked for the 2012 Orioles. I mean, yeah, they had Machado, and then Scope came, and some other guys after that, and Gausman and Bundy, and go through the list. But they also found a Miguel Gonzalez. They found guys of that ilk who came out of nowhere and ended up being big contributors. It's going to be really interesting in some ways because these guys are going to do things differently than the previous regime, but it's also still going to be a lot of losing, and there's still going to be a lot of heartache on the field at Camden Yards. So really buckle up, to borrow a former expression that was popular here in town, but it's going to be bumpy. But again, I was just listening to a podcast from, I guess, MLB.com, their pipeline, which they really focus on the minor leagues and the draft and Rule 5 and all of that. And Elias did a brief interview with them, which wasn't anything earth-shattering. It was very similar to what he said in his introductory press conference. But to hear Jonathan Mayo and I think Jim Callis was on there as well, I mean, these guys were absolutely over the moon for this hire, and they said the Orioles absolutely got this right, and there's no guarantee because we've seen the lieutenant of other great organizations not always work out, whether you're talking about a head coach in the NFL, defensive coordinator leaves and goes elsewhere and doesn't work out, like Matt Patricia right now in Detroit, for example, and we've seen executives in various sports, but for everything that we know about Elias, everything we know about Sig Meidel, everything you can read in Astro Ball, everything that you could see that the Astros accomplished over the last 5 or 6 years, knowing what kind of a big part they played in that, that's where Orioles fans can, you might have to grit your teeth a little bit, you might need to bite your tongue a little bit, hide your eyes on occasion, but I think these guys are good baseball people, and if this thing's going to get turned around in a timely manner, I think having them at the helm makes that more likely for it to happen.
He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. You can find us out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn radio app. We do come in crystal clear everywhere you go. We go. Podcast, listen to what you want, when you want, where you want, all week long as we get ready for the Atlanta Falcons. The Orioles do what they do, and the Terps get ready for Big Ten play and Penn State. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. And I'm in Atlanta, not just for SEC football this weekend, but of course for the Ravens on Sunday. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.